Hello and welcome to another anime lore and theory video. I'm Shergok, your host, and today we are going to take a closer look at why Neia Baraja betrayed her home country and her own faith, and now preaches in the name of Ainz Ooal. But before we're going to take a closer look at any of this, let me quickly thank my Patreons for supporting this channel, as well as say thanks to all users of the YouTube thanks function for making one-time donations. And with that said, let's get to the topic at hand. And there are many factors that led Neia to proclaim the de facto killer of her parents as a figure of justice and spread his word and values, or at least what she believes them to be, throughout her homeland, the entirety of the Holy Kingdom. And there are many causes behind all of this. But these many causes can be wonderfully and quite simply explained to one person. It was Theuscustodio of all people, the Grand Master of the Paladin Order, who made Neia so receptive to the message of the Sorcer King, though Neia continued to work excellently within the ranks of the other Paladins, and always strove to advance her troops and free the Holy Kingdom from the terror and yoke of Yaldabaoth. She just endured Theuscustodio for these goals. She suffered under her leadership, but put up with it because of her ideals, goals, dreams, and hopes. Nonetheless, Ridos actively disgusted Neia and nearly pushed her out of the order all on her own. While Ridos was of course an outstanding force on the battlefield, a one-woman army who could hold and defend entire city gates with just a small support team at her back, she was still just a warrior, a blunt weapon, the most unrefined tool you could use against anyone or anything without needing constant supervision. It was almost enough to simply shout, "There! Those are the vile enemies," and Ridos would cut them down without a second thought. But such people belong in elite units, not in leadership positions, because as leadership and organization of an entire force is vastly different from just fighting on the battlefield and has little to do with just raw combat strength alone. And even that wouldn't be so bad if Ridos had at least recognized her own shortcomings. Not in the sense of blaming her little sister Theuscustodio whenever something unexpected happened or when some plan apparently failed, but in realizing, hey, I can't do certain things. People may be disgusted by my ways and by my preachy nature, so maybe I should get an adjutant or someone else to advise me so that I can lead and motivate those under my command properly when the situation calls for it, so that they remain loyal to me and my team and to the Paladins and to the Holy Kingdom at large. Because nothing would be worse than if I, due to my own mistakes, due to my own mistakes, due to my own behaviors, would harm our shared cause, our faith, and our values. But the problem with stupid people is that they don't understand that they are indeed stupid, that they have weaknesses, that they are not all competent, which is why they think they are actually clever and know how to handle things. And with Ridos, this manifested as an impenetrable dogmatism and blind obedience to her faith. She couldn't even understand why not everyone was as morally outraged about things in the Holy Kingdom as she constantly was. Why not everyone was as fanatical as she was in doing everything to bring out the best outcome for the people in the Holy Kingdom. She didn't understand that meeting a high-ranking noble is not the same as defeating an opponent on the battlefield, and that external circumstances could also be responsible for one not being able to meet said noble, as Neia wasn't able to do so, and that it wasn't Neia's fault. If she was told that the noble she was supposed to meet wasn't there, and that trying harder or better to meet him isn't the solution and not even possible in this situation. This accusatory and baseless aggression, especially towards the weakest and low-ranking member of the Liberation Army, namely Neia Baraja, the Squire, and thus not even a full-fledged member of the Order, was also exactly the opposite of what Calca Besaris originally wanted. She wanted the weak to be protected and everyone to be well off, so attacking Neia, in this mental way and fashion, in this accusatory way, was the exact opposite of what Remedios should have been doing if she truly understood the ideals of her queen. And this relentless hyper-moralistic aggression against anyone who didn't seem to stand fully behind her cause from her own perspective, even though they certainly did at this time, achieved exactly the opposite of what she intended. And Neia, who was the one with the sharp senses and the high-ranking scout abilities that led the paladin troop from the Holy Kingdom out, was always Remedios' scapegoat. She received no recognition for her feats and her deeds. Instead, there was only constant criticism that she wasn't doing enough, and that she needed to try harder. And this had already caused Neia to feel isolated and poorly supported even before she had any contact with the Sorcerer Kingdom and its king. And here's a relatively simple example from Neia's everyday life that illustrates this. Since Neia and the rest of the Liberation Army, who, as mentioned, numbered only a few dozen at the time, had been riding towards the Sorcerer Kingdom for nearly a month, parts of her lower body had become chafed and sore from the intense strain of riding every day for many hours. However, Neia didn't even dare to ask for healing magic for something like that anymore, because it would have been uncomfortable for her if Remedios berated and attacked her in front of the entire company for it. Something that's of course easy to understand why Neia don't want to have Remedios, of all people, talk publicly about her lower body parts. And again, this was now the standard that Neia Baraja had become accustomed to. She had led the entire Liberation Army out of the Holy Kingdom with her sharp senses and her keen intellect, something that Remedios would not have been able to do, essentially saving them. And yet she was despised by Remedios, constantly humiliated and isolated within her group. She was the scapegoat and lightning rod for everything that didn't go Remedios' way. And now she was finally faced with the very being that Remedios' teaching had always warned her about. A creature so devilish and vile, so deceitful and underhanded and treacherous, so abominable, and so hell-bent on eradicating all life that in any other situation one would fight this being on the spot. It was the king of the enemies of all life, the undead Sorcerer King Ainz Ooal gone himself. And for the first time Neia was confronted with the other side, the one Remedios always raged about as being evil and nothing else. And it was a day and night contrast. The Sorcerer King was the complete opposite of Remedios. Even though he was way higher in the social hierarchy of things, he was polite, reserved, and considerate. He respected Neia as a person, and was very careful to treat her with, despite her low status as a quire, with respect and honor. And of course we know that Ainz didn't do this out of pure altruism, but because he possibly wanted to turn someone of the paladins, or rather as many of the paladins, to his own side. Just like he promised to do to Demiurge. But Neia didn't know any of this. She didn't know that Ainz was behind all of the suffering in the Holy Kingdom, because it was his secret plan, essentially. And so secret that only Ainz knew that Demiurge was up to something in the Holy Kingdom, in fact. Even though he didn't fully understand what it was. But still, and I want to emphasize this here again, he could theoretically have stopped the invasion at any time under some pretext, and thereby ended the suffering of the population. Just as an insight, but as mentioned, as far as Neia could understand, Ainz Ooal has a decent personality. He was a decent undead, who treated her well, and showed her trust in the form of the bow he entrusted to her. And of course he hoped she would show it to as many people as possible, supposedly because the bow was forged using the secret art of runecraft. So it was essentially a promotional gift for the runecraft weapons that were now being manufactured in the Sorcerer Kingdom. But to Neia it was a national treasure. She was allowed to guard, and therefore it was a great honor. And Neia was also allowed to ride in the warm and soft-padded carriage of the Sorcerer King, and she spent a month with Ainz in this manner on the road. And she was increasingly fascinated by how incredibly kind and humble someone could be in this position, especially an undead, who would normally be leagues above her, as not only in terms of social hierarchy, but who would also be a deadly threat to her in any other situation, and this made the contrast between the Sorcerer King and Remedios all the more apparent. Another moment that opened Neia's eyes was the liberation of the prison camp and the roasting of the hostages by a fireball spell, simply to deprive the enemy commander of his one bargaining chip and show him, and by proxy all of the other hostage takers, that these hostages held no value to them, to the enemy. And this of course caused them to abandon the thousands of additional hostages and focus only on the battle itself, which ultimately saved those thousands of lives. However, this act is something that can still be condemned, for Ainz directed a fireball spell at an innocent child, and when confronted by none other than the father of one of the half-burned children, he did not ask for forgiveness. Instead, he explained to the grieving father that his weakness was the reason his child was no longer among the living. His weakness and inability to protect his child had led to the situation. Weakness is a sin. It is the only sin that nature truly recognizes and punishes most brutally. This was a lesson, a deep insight into the secret nature of the world, something not found in the teachings of the Holy Kingdom for Neia. And when Neia was revived by Ainz Ooal, she also realized that strength isn't everything, for true justice would be to use one's own strength, not just to help the weak, but to make them strong as well. That's why weakness is a sin, and that's why His Majesty the Sorcerer King is the embodiment of justice, because he doesn't use his strength to trample on the weak, but to protect them. Even if it costs individual lives, which in the grand scheme of things is inevitable. And this is also important, not the mistake of the Sorcerer King, and this far-reaching insight into the deepest secret and sight and inner workings of the world, this philosophy that was nourished by actual experiences and not by blind faith and dogma, became the focal point of Neia's new belief system, simply because the Sorcerer King's teaching, at least in her perspective, worked in the real world and explained the world very, very well. It explained why there are cruelties, why good and evil existed, and that one must take action to bring about justice. And this requires strength. And these fundamental realizations made Ainz Ooal not just a kind undead in Neia's eyes, but also someone who personified ideals that can be summarized as justice. A person one would gladly follow. And Neia also used her own strength the way Ainz Ooal would use it, at least from her own perspective. Despite her extremely grown immense power, she didn't place herself above others. She was kind to everyone, and sincerely tried to convince people of her point of view. Unlike Remedios, she also had the necessary talent for it. And as mentioned, despite everything, she remained humble and didn't become decadent or above people. And as mentioned, despite everything, she remained humble and didn't become decadent and above people. And on one occasion, in the 13th novel to be precise, you could even see Neia Baraja and Shizu Delta cuddling and exchanging affectionate gestures, aka head pats. And it was nice for Shizu as well, having finally found a friend in this sort of senpai-kohai relationship. And in short, this is why Neia Baraja betrayed her old faith and the Holy Kingdom in favor of Ainz Ooal, because Ainz as an undead was in many ways a better person compared to Remedios, and his worldview, his supposed worldview, made more sense from Neia's perspective. However, if Remedios had become so repulsive to Neia in the most literal of senses, she wouldn't have been as open to Ainz Ooal's perspective. So in a sense, Paladin Philip clearly shares some sort of blame for Neia's change of heart. And Neia is also undoubtedly a better leader than Theuscustodio ever was, and even better than Calca Besares, because the Golden Queen of the Holy Kingdom was too reserved and too meek when it came to ruling. Out of a misguided sense of restraint and tolerance, she allowed evil to grow unchecked. Meanwhile, Neia Baraja, as we all know, had no qualms making sacrifices if the situation demanded it, aka aim for their heads. In other words, she can approach things in a more pragmatic and realpolitik manner than the former Holy Queen ever could. Which, again, makes her the better leader. And now it's your turn. What do you think about Neia Baraja's change of heart and how it came to be? Feel free to let me know it down in the comment section. And while you're typing, I say thank you very much for watching, thanks to all of my Patreons for supporting this channel, and as usual, special thanks to Other Daddy Other, ASK, Bad Guy Ye, Bad Burrito 316, Bezer, Ben C, Brandon D, Chrissy, Crowley 022Ron, Sia, Crystal Prime, Dead Slime, Death is Mercy, Deathless Dragonlord, Demon Xenomorph 1987, Devin Downen, Ding Dong, Dan Pep, Dragonlord Placido Saxophone, Duckwagon, Dunkler Krieger, Dystopia, Dystopia II, Enigmatic Unicorn, Theralchivan, Guy with That Head, Hector Marino, Hoss, Huster, Jacob G, Jana B, Jason, J. Morris, Chromius, Kyle R, Lee K. Long, Legendarius, Lelouch V. Britannia with a Mustache, Lexus Fox, Lord Nishikian Rai, Lord Touch Me, Loverazer, Merovec, Mr. Shoes, Mr. Tweaker, Michael R, Michael Y, Nope, Oh Hell No, Normal Toad, O'Kill, Overlord General Gasper, Paddy Pantum, Personage, Ruru, Primus 11, Rhinomere, Cune Caracos P, Shergox's Daddy, Shadow Lightning Wolf, Shrine Keeper, Sir Axolotl, Super Tier Magic Batista Bomb, Supreme Cheese, Staris, Ted, Texas Deer, Diorg Warboss, Rock Ed Smasher, T.E. Wang, Vash Hawkeye, Vegito 27, Venture Fanatic, Wilhelm, Zinukai, and Sonagon. Thanks guys. Anyway, have a nice day, and I hope to see you all again soon on my next video.